11 years ago, Bugatti lent me a Veyron for a day. It was one of the best motoring days of my life, and it kind of kick-started my career because we posted a video of me doing 220 something and lots of people saw it on the interwebs. Well, now Bugatti has a new car. It's called the Chiron, and once again, they've given it to me for one day. What would you do with your one day in a Chiron? Obviously, I'm going to drive all day, but before we go, some numbers. £2 million, 1,500 horsepower, 4 turbochargers, 8 litres, 16 cylinders. Yeah, this is the new Veyron. We are actually on the border of Oman and the UAE on some stunning mountain roads. So we're going to wiggle around here a bit. Yeah, amazing. Or as my American colleague would say, sweet. Takes all of about 400 yards of driving in the Chiron to realise that this is a profoundly different car to a Veyron. I suspected and feared it would just be another Veyron with more power. In other words, a car that was immensely impressive in a straight line at very high speed, but didn't really like corners. This car loves corners. In fact, on this road, it demolishes most other cars. And that's down in part to the steering, which is now superb. This is one of the best electric steering racks I've ever driven. Apparently there are 7 different algorithms overlapped to give it the right response. The result is a car you can place really, really well. And then there's the new Michelin Cup 2 tyre, super sticky. And then there's the 4-wheel drive system, which is helpful. And then there's the electronics, which mean you can just leave the thing wide open and hang in them. I'm not man enough to turn it off here, and you don't need to. Anyhow, watch what happens when you accelerate. Yes, I don't have words to describe what this can do. The ride is level and composed. It is just designed to demolish road surfaces. I think, technically, over this kind of surface, it's one of the most complete cars I've ever driven. And I really didn't expect to say that. The engine, what's to say? Sequential turbo, so from zip to about 3.8 I get 2, then the other 2 come in full afterburner effect. So you get a lovely step at about 3.8 that makes you just feel like a school child all over again. And the numbers that come up on the dashboard, can't really talk about them. In terms of power and torque, this car has no equal. On this road, I don't think anything can stay with it. 918 maybe with all its torque vectoring, but once you get to an open stretch, this is just brutal. And it's so composed. And you know what? It's fun. It's fun threading it accurately. It's not a car you let slip and slide, or there's a bit of slip allowed in the handling mode. In the EB mode, which is the normal mode, you get more supple ride and earlier intervention on the electronics. But oh my days, what a machine. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. That's my look of surprise, because I did not expect this car to be able to do this on a windy road. Wow. So, it may be miles better than expected on a windy road, but you have to clock some proper speed during your 24 hours with a Chiron, so we're heading back to the Al Maktoum airport where we shot the television film to head north of 200 miles per hour. This is what you might call a runway. Look at that for a view. Look at that for a view. Quite often people like me get a bit sniffy about straight line speed. It lacks skill. Circuits are more glamorous. There is something about a car that can go around a circuit that makes it somehow more credible than a car that can just go straight in a straight line. But speed's addictive, isn't it? Speed is addictive. I'm addicted to speed. I have a 4.8 kilometre runway ahead of me and a car with 1,500 horsepower that's currently limited to 236 miles an hour. What would you do? Know what I'm going to do? This insane vehicle runs with a tyre pressure monitoring system that goes to 2 decimal places because tyre pressures are critical. I'm now running at about right. Below 2.8 bar is dangerous, so I'm going to concentrate. And the pressure drops with the airflow over, so I'm losing pressure front left and rear right. Keep one eye on it, it's fine. And there we are. 236 miles an hour, one hand. I think they call that engineering. I'm going to slow down. That's outrageous. There's so much airflow over the front tyres, they cool as you go up through 200 miles an hour and you lose pressure. How mad is that? So this is it then, the first all-new Aston Martin in a long, long time. Looks pretty, but is it any good? Within about 20 seconds of driving this car, you know straight away it's a GT, not a sports car. It's quite big, and with the dampers set to soft, it's supple. It's much more comfortable than any rival. Even an F12 with the dampers knocked back isn't as supple as this thing, and I like that. There's a bloke working at Aston Martin now who used to be at Lotus. I won't say his name, he'll be embarrassed. But you can feel his influence in the way this car is very supple, it's got good wheel travel, and it's happy to go the full throw of the damper the whole time. So, I like that, fits the character of the car. The engine, well, that's interesting. It doesn't feel that turbocharged to me, but the torque is so enormous that it frankly overcomes the rear wheels. As you can see, it's raining on a wet, damp day like this. You can barely use the thing, even with the damper set to soft, and that's a bit of a pain. But you really can change the personality of this car with these two buttons on the dash. I've got an S here and a damper here. So this S button gives me the DNA of my powertrain, so gear shift, engine, that kind of thing. And that means I can go from normal to sport plus. Sport plus gives me a loud exhaust as well. Here we go, here's some of this. They've done a really good job of getting intake noise considering it's turbocharged, so well done Aston Martin. The damper button, again, 3 settings, normal, which is called GT mode, I quite like that, sport, and then sport plus. Firm it up, you get a load more support, less roll, and a less kind of heaving motion over bumps, but you do lose a load of that ride comfort. So on the road, I tend to leave it in GT, and I have it on the second powertrain mode, so just sport, better throttle response, and a little bit more noise, not too raucous though. Do you like the styling? It doesn't photograph well, and I worry that the whole floating C-pillar thing will age cars like this and the i8 a bit quickly, but on the road, I actually really like the DB11's wide-hipped look. The numbers are 600 horsepower from the 5.2-litre twin-turbo V12, 516 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighs 1,770 kilograms. Aston claims it'll do 200 miles an hour, and it feels that punchy. The front brakes are 400mm steels, the gearbox is the 8-speed ZF unit, and Bridgestone named the tyre the S007. How sweet. So for fast road driving, I think this car is really well judged. Gearbox, calibration of that is very clever too, ZF 8-speed. Just leave it in drive and it really does think for you. You don't need to have it in manual. Now and again it's nice to snick a gear, but I just leave it in drive and away you go. Again, reinforcing the GT credentials. Cabin, well, as a place to sit, it's lovely. There's lots going on here. The Mercedes infotainment doesn't feel that modern nowadays, but I love the readout here. It's very clear and it's a new direction for Aston Martin. The square steering wheel, yeah, you can keep that. Wind and tyre noise, again, well suppressed, supporting the GT roll. But what's it like if you drive it really fast? I suppose we ought to go to a racing circuit. The weather at Anglesey is horrendous today, pretty much flooded, so it's going to be more side window viewing forwards than windscreen. And I know I'll be accused of being irrelevant, but that's the way it is, okay? I can tell you what it's like on the road. I have done. I've told you about the refinement, the damping, everything else. So now you need to know what it's like to absolutely thrape the new DB11 within an inch of its life. And I will gladly do that for you, although it's looking very, very, very flooded here. So we'll see what we can do without throwing it into the Irish Sea. First of all, I'm in the most aggressive chassis mode. I've got my dampers in the middle mode, and I've got my traction and stability completely off. This does mean that the first 3 gears are to be used tentatively. In fourth, you can give it the full potatoes. So there you go, this is second gear now. You have an idea how easily it goes. A little sniff of throttle and it's already fully sideways. So what have we got? We've got easily the most balanced Aston chassis I've ever driven. This is an absolute honey, long wheelbase, lots of steering lock, and a level of progression towards the outer limits of oversteer that I've never experienced in an Aston. They can normally be quite spiky, but this is really, really nice. That's partly down to the differential. The last few fast Astons I've driven have been a bit nightmarish. The diff sort of gets hot and becomes asymmetrical, works one way and not the other. Well, this one, not the same. This feels like a completely new setup for Aston Martin to me. Gearbox is great, it's shifting quickly. I've got it in the manual setting. The tyre, the Bridgestone tyre, feels quite hard to me. I mean, it's not finding anything like the grip that an equivalent Michelin would in these conditions, but it's beautifully progressive when it breaks away. The motor, very interesting. I had to remind myself it was turbocharged a minute ago because it makes such a great noise and the delivery is so linear. You only realise it's turbocharged when you start to think about how much it's struggling to get any traction. I mean, if I touch the throttle there, look at that. I'm barely even trying, to be honest with you. And through this quick right-hander here, if I just turn in, it will want to oversteer. There it goes. Brakes are good. They're not ceramic. For the money, should they be ceramic? Probably. The other thing I've noticed is that when you want to turn the car in, this car's got a bit of rear bias, so you can actually use the brake just to help it in. Now, there you go, there it goes. Look at that. I did that under brakes. I didn't touch the throttle. That's quite helpful. Utterly irrelevant for a large GT car, I'll give you that. All round, I didn't expect it to be this much fun. It's a really, really playful, fun car with heaps of balance and much easier to slide around than I ever expected. And it feels like it could do it for a long, long time. It feels robust. So, yeah, this is miles better than I'd expected. Let's first of all square this whole Rolls-Royce's going off-road thing, because it's not that much of a surprise. Nearly 100 years ago, Rolls-Royces were regularly going off-road because there were no roads. And actually, the legend of Rolls-Royce was built on the fact they were indestructible and they could drive on gravel roads. Does it feel wrong to be doing this in a Rolls-Royce? I'm not sure it does. Car's a car, isn't it? It's a massive SUV. It should be able to do this. The refinement in this thing is extraordinary. We've been in it for 10 minutes and it is unquestionably the quietest SUV ever built. I think in engineering terms this is incredibly impressive. It's massive, it's quiet, it's so comfortable. The ride quality is, yeah, it's not been seen in a car of this type before. However, and this is the subjective bit, from the rear three-quarter I can live with it. From the front I think it looks, there's a technical phrase for this, terrible. Slight dilemma here. I'm 7,780 feet up a mountain in this brand new Rolls-Royce that's worth as much as a row of houses in, say, Merthyr Tydfil. And there's a big puddle there. I mean, should you really get a Rolls-Royce covered in, for want of a better word, crap? I suppose you should, shouldn't you? So it's windows up, and I'm going to get mud on a roller. So Rolls-Royce has built an SUV. It's not much of a surprise really, is it? Last night, a man from Rolls-Royce told us how the company had agonised for ages about whether it should build an SUV or not, but I'm not sure I buy into that. It was a no-brainer. commercially this vehicle was always going to sell, because let's face it, as the world becomes richer, the rich people become more tasteless and they want more and more SUVs. And that's why Lamborghini makes one, and Bentley makes one, and Porsche makes one, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Ferrari is going to make one. So here we are in a Rolls-Royce SUV. Now I'll lay my cards on the table from the outset. I don't like SUVs. I can't think of a single situation in which I'd rather have an SUV in which to live with and use as my everyday spacious car over an estate car. Estate cars are better. I'd rather be lower to the ground and not so heavy and not so ostentatious. But I have to put myself into someone else's shoes and try and understand why someone might want to buy this car. So I'll treat it objectively, I promise. The car is called the Cullinan, and that's named after the largest uncut diamond ever taken out of the ground. I stood there last night as Rolls-Royce's design team talked me around the reasons why this line met that line, and that swage did this and that did that, and I thought to myself, it all sounds really clever, but it's a bit gopping. I've not met a single person who says they think the Cullinan looks good, offers a positive reaction. Some people will make excuses for it and say, oh, it's not too bad from this angle or that angle. But for well over £300,000, you shouldn't be justifying yourself by saying it doesn't look too bad, should you? Now, I normally shy away from discussing subjective matters, taste, the way things look. But with the Cullinan, I have to get involved because I just don't think it looks very good. It looks to me like a Chinese knockoff of what they think a Rolls-Royce SUV should look like. You know what I mean? When you go to a motor show and you see something that looks a bit, ugh, that's it. That's how this car looks. That's just terrible, I think. The engineering that's gone into this thing is impressive. They've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years. It's on a bespoke platform. It's a heightened, moved around Phantom underneath, but it is a completely unique platform for this car. That's critical because if you go and look at an Urus or a Bentayga or a Cayenne or a Touareg, they all share commonality. This thing doesn't. This is a standalone vehicle, and that's very impressive, and it means it's very, very, very strong indeed. And when you've got a stiff structure, you've got stability. When you've got stability, you can have great suspension. So from the moment you get in this thing, the ride comfort is different level. There is no other SUV that gives you the sense of serenity that you have in this car. The MVH is incredible. It's got about 100 kilograms of sound deadening material wedged up inside wheel arches, in the floor, everything else. This is a silent SUV. At times, you're not sure if the engine is running. That's the ultimate accolade for a luxury vehicle. When you keep trying to start it again, you turn it off. I've done it 3 times today in this car. The ride at low speed, very good. When you get to medium speeds, again, it has that slightly magic carpet quality, but occasionally there's a big sort of transverse line, a seam between 2 surfaces that rattles those air spheres a bit, and it isn't that dignified. It could be better, I think. But all in all, it does that job better than any other car of its type that I've driven. Well done, Rolls-Royce. So if you want to be silent and be comfortable, then this is the best SUV ever made. Now, the engine. 6.75 litres, twin turbocharged, and more power than the Saturn V rocket. Yes, this thing weighs, not far short of 3 tons, but when it picks up its skirt, by hell it goes. The old power reserve needle goes down to 0 and it just fires along. I have no idea how accelerative it is, but it's more than enough for something this big. I'll tell you why, because when you get to the first corner, you've got to stop the bloody thing, and it does that just about, but I wouldn't want it to be any more powerful because it's so heavy. You have this sense of inertia. Trying to stop all that mass is really tricky. And then there's the handling. There's body roll because it needs to be supple to keep that lovely ride. And also it just starts to understeer. It's a bit like the Phantom in that respect. It lulls you into thinking it's hidden all that mass. And the moment at which it goes, actually I was tricking you, you're in trouble. So don't barrel into corners too much. Don't think for a minute this can compete with the likes of the Urus or the Bentayga or any of those in terms of agility. It's a much, much bigger beast. But the person who buys it, I suspect, won't care about that. Does the Cullinan owner drive it themselves or be driven in it? Unquestionably, they drive it. This is not a Phantom. What's it like to drive then? It's commanding. The driving position is yeah, it's imperious. I'm just looking down on the poor people of the world. I'm not that comfortable with that, but I suppose some people are. The cabin, well, I tell you what, rather than do that on the move, let's talk you round the cabin now, and then we'll come back to some more bits about how it drives and how it makes you feel. So here is the outside of the Cullinan. I'm not going to walk around and describe the styling to you because you can see it. So maybe we just leave the outside alone. Oh, no, go to the rear three-quarter. Nilo, rear three-quarter. Now this is the only surprising bit for me. The more time I've spent with the car, the more this kind of works for me, okay? It's a bit Range Rover-y, it's quite bulky, it's quite powerful, and this sort of suggestion that there's a luggage compartment on the back of it, yeah, it kind of works. But the boot itself, well, come and have a look. It's not that big, is it? In fact, with those massive wheel arch intrusions there, because it's got big air spheres, that's a tiny boot. If you have two Labradors, one will need to be dominant. So what they've done is they've sacrificed luggage space for, wait for it, for rear legroom. And there's plenty of that, allow me to show you. Okay, and we get, it's spacious. But I sense there's been a sort of clash of conscience at Rolls-Royce as to whether they needed the rear legroom or the boot space. And they've happened across a solution that isn't necessarily quite what I thought it would be, but there we go. They know more about these cars than I do. You've got touchscreens here. You've got a USB-C down in there to charge your devices. You control the radio, you've got different heater functions, and you've got a glass roof. Do you know what? It is luxurious, and there are so many different rear seat options. This is the bench option, so this gives you the proper family rolls, but you can go for individual rear seats, and you can go for the super luxurious ones which have extra padding and look a bit like a first class aircraft seat. The all-powerful driving seat. Ahead of me lies a world of poorer people than me. So, steering wheel has got a thicker rim than a Phantom. I quite like thin rim steering wheels on Rolls-Royces, particularly the little Bakelite one on the Phantom 7, but this hasn't got it. This is a rough, leathery substance that looks like rubber. Don't quite understand it. The rest of the materials are beautiful. I mean, it's a step above a Bentayga in terms of the materials used, I'll give them that. The ergonomics, Ponzi word for where stuff is, are quite baffling at times. These little buttons here, they control what your seat's doing in terms of fans, because it will cool your bottom, or heating, because it'll heat your bottom, or your heated steering wheel. If you want a massage, well, that should be in the same place, but that's down here. That's hidden down there. Why is that down there and those are there? And why are they so small? I can't see them. This is the sort of Rolls-Royce contorted iDrive thing, because it all comes from BMW ultimately. And the stuff on the leeward side of where I'm sitting, I can't see. This armrest here it feels really cheap, you know? The rest of it feels expensive. That to me feels, there's a whiff of Citroen Picasso about that. Instrument pack, pretty. This nav screen, I quite like that because it's quite small. However, crucially, watch this. When the Cullinan driver can't be asked to lean there, look, I just can't be asked to reach that door. Can't be asked. Almost worth 330 grand alone, isn't it? Let's do that again. Let's do that one more time. Watch that. Yeah. I can't be asked to move 6 inches. So it's a mixture. It's not as expensive as a Phantom, and it doesn't feel it. It lacks the opulence, it lacks some of the quality. The seat is really impressive in the front, it's supportive and it's very comfortable, and that coupled with the lack of noise and harshness in the cabin means this is a very, very relaxing place to be, and long journeys are not going to be fatiguing. This, in many ways, is a car that you don't want to get out of because it's so comfortable, the seat is so good, the ride is just so plush, and the general sense of silence and of being in something that's engineered to perfection is, it's just so powerful. But also you don't want to look at it, because when you get out, for me that illusion's shattered. I just don't want to see it. I want to park it up and walk away from it. The rear three-quarter's getting better for me, but it's just not a looker, is it? I just feel a bit ashamed to be seen in it, which is, I know it's sad, and I'm sure there are lots of you out there that think it's gorgeous. And I've never ever allowed myself to have, to have an opinion, an overall opinion about the car so fundamentally swayed by the way it looks, but I just don't want to be seen in this thing. I really don't. However, the new Phantom, I have one of those. So what I'd say to you is, if you can deal with the looks, this is a great car. If you can't, like me, get a Phantom. And if not, just do the world a favour and buy an estate car.